Today we're going to learn how to solve equations by multiplication or multiplying and dividing. Okay, today we're going to learn how to solve one-step equations with only one variable by using multiplication or division. The first thing we're going to talk about, just like we did yesterday, were the inverse operations. Can someone tell me the inverse operation of addition? MJ? Subtraction. Can someone tell me the inverse operation of subtraction? Addition. Good. Now today, as we can see in our chart, the inverse of multiplication is division, and the inverse of division is multiplication, vice versa. So when we're given a multiplication equation, we will use division to solve, and when we're given a division equation, we're going to use multiplication to solve. Again, our goal is to isolate the variable. Okay, here is our first example. Can anyone tell me what type of equation this is right here? Starting out, what kind of equation is it when it's written like a fraction? Division. Okay, what did we just say was the inverse of division? Multiplication. So whenever we solve a division equation, we are always going to multiply both sides of the equation by the number next to the letter. So the number that's on the side with the letter is the number 3. So I am going to multiply both sides of my equation by 3. Notice here, the 3's will cancel, and then for my final answer, I'm going to multiply 3 times negative 8, and I get negative 24. All right, now they're also providing the check. Again, remember, take your original equation, and we are going to replace the value of j that we just calculated. So over here, I'm going to write negative 24 divided by 3. I find that to be negative 8, and that's what I wanted my equation to equal. So it checks. If this number that after I divided was not negative 8, then I knew I did something wrong and I needed to go back and rework. So always try to do the check. When we take the quiz on Tuesday, I highly recommend you do the check. You will have the entire class period to do the 10 questions, and you will not be able to get your iPad or any of your things until everyone finishes the quiz. So take your time, watch your signs, and double check your work. Let's go to another example. Again, we have a division equation that we will be using multiplication to solve. So again, our division equations are written as fractions. What am I going to multiply both sides of my equation by to solve for n, or to isolate n? Bridget?
6.
Beautiful. We are going to multiply both sides by 6. It will cause over here on the side with the variable to become 1s. So I'm really left with 1n. I don't need to write the n or the 1. I'm now going to multiply the 2.8 times 6. Can anyone tell me 6 times 8?
48.
Thank you, Melanie. So then, can anyone tell me 6 times 2? 12. Plus 4 is 16. Notice I have one number after the decimal point. So I put one number in my answer. Okay, now, again, it was a positive times a positive, so my answer is positive. And again, they've provided the check here. They divided 16.8 by 6. They got 2.8. It checked out. Okay, let's look at an example. Okay, they're going back to an easier problem. No decimals this time, just integers. So again, I've got a fraction here. And again, remember the fraction means division. So what kind of operation am I going to use when I solve division? And what am I going to multiply by? 5. So I'm going to multiply both sides by the number that's with the letter, which is the 5. And actually, I'll just put it as a parenthesis. So then the 5's cancel away, and then I'm left with P is equal to 50. And again, I could do the check. Take your original equation. Is 50 divided by 510? Yes, it is. It checks. Try the next one. Again, just integers here. This time it's written backwards. They've got the answer first. However, the process is still the same. Okay, it's division. To undo division, I'm going to use multiplication. What do we divide or multiply both sides by? The 3. The number that is with the letter. So times this side by 3 and this side by 3. Cancels away. And what is 3 times negative 13? Anybody raise your hand? Cassandra?
Negative 39.
Beautiful. Positive times a negative is a negative, and 3 times 13 is 39. Nice. Another example. Again, just integers here. So if I have my division equation, again, I'm going to use multiplication. What am I multiplying both sides by? The 8, the number that's with the letter. It cancels away from the letter C, and 7 times 8 is 56. Now we're going to switch things up. Now we're going to start with multiplication, and we're going to use what to solve? For division. All right, so now I'm going to write my multiplication equation. Remember, when a letter and a number are side by side, it means to multiply. To demonstrate my division here, my division property of equality, I'm writing them as fractions. So I'm going to show that I am dividing both sides by the number that's with the letter. So I will divide both sides by 9. What is 9 divided by 9? It's 1. So really, I'm left here with 1y. Again, I don't need to write the 1. It's assumed. And then now I have to divide this side to get my final answer. I will put the 108 in my division box and the 9 outside. How many times will 9 go into 10? Once. I will subtract. And then how many times will 9 go into 18? Twice. So my answer here is 12. So when it's multiplication starting out, we will use division to solve. Here we go. We have a decimal in our problem. However, it's still a multiplication equation. And we're going to use division to solve. What am I going to divide by? Bridget?
-6.
Good. We're dividing by the number next to the letter. Don't forget your negative sign. -6 here, -6 here. Now, I'm dividing a negative by a negative. What is that going to give me? What kind of sign? A positive. So I already know I'm looking for a positive answer. You guys remember how to divide decimals? All right, now, I don't have a decimal outside of my division box. I just have it inside. So I'm gonna bring it straight up. 6 will not go into 4, so I put a 0. However, 6 will go into 48 8 times. So my answer here is positive 0.8 or 8 tenths. Now, again, you don't need to show the plus sign. You could just put 0.8. If you just give me 0.8, either answer would be acceptable. All right, they're giving us a little bit easier question. It's backwards though. They have the answer first. However, process is still the same. What am I dividing by? 4. Okay, the number with the letter. 16 divided by 4? And that's what C equals. I'm going to switch it up a little here. What if I gave you 5 is equal to 10x? What am I dividing by, Cassandra?
You're dividing 10 by 5.
Okay. What am I dividing again?
10 by 5.
10 by 5? What should I always divide both sides by? Which number? The 10, the number next to the letter. Okay, so watch this. Our answers don't always have to be whole numbers. Watch what happens on this. There's one like this in the homework. What's 10 divided by 10? 1x, right? Just the x. However, over here, I can leave it like this, but reduce it. So right now I'm at 5 over 10. 1/2. So when you're doing your homework, turn it into a simplified fraction, or you could divide it. And you could have gotten 0.5. Okay? Either answer here would be acceptable. If it needs to be reduced, you must simplify. If on the quiz, if this were the problem, and if you were to have left it as 5 over 10, you wouldn't have gotten the whole thing wrong. I would give you partial credit. However, always simplify for full credit. So be careful. There's one like this in the homework. Always divide by the number next to the letter. All right. Here's one they're changing it up a little. Now the decimal is going to be outside of our division box. So we have 0.5y is equal to -10. I'm going to divide both sides by what? Okay, good. Then the 0.5, and it's positive. So 0.5 here, 0.5 here. This cancels. 10 goes in my division box. Now, over here, let's set up my answer. Is my answer going to be positive or negative? Negative, good. All right, so now, what do I do when I have a decimal outside of my division box? How do I deal with that, MJ? Okay, I need to move it so it's behind the number. Do I do anything inside the box?
Oh, yes. You do the same as you want.
Good. I do the same thing. I'm going to move it the same number of times that I did outside. So I actually have to move the decimal point after I add it and make it 100. How many times will 5 go into 100? Let's start slower. How many times will 5 go into 10? 2 times, right? All right. And then I bring down the other 0 and it goes in 20 times. So my final answer here is -20. All right, here's another multiplication. You can look at the example. Again, you're dividing by the number next to the letter, which is 15, and 75 divided by 15 is 5. All right, now, here's a little hint. Remember that dividing is really the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal when we're dealing with fractions. Okay, so when we have a multiplication equation that has fractions in it, all we're going to do is multiply both sides by the reciprocal. I'll show you an example of this next. All right, so we have our fraction next to our letter, our equal sign, and then the answer. So right now, this is a multiplication equation, and I need to use division to solve. So technically, I could show that I'm dividing both sides by 5/6. Now, when we do this, I've had too many times where my students, they forget which one to flip upside down to the reciprocal. So what I found is an easier way for them to think about or remember which way to flip is you're going to take your original. So I'm going to rewrite it again. 5/6w equals -20. So whenever you see a fraction next to a letter, right next to it, write the reciprocal of that. And then you're going to write the same reciprocal on this side. I'm going to turn that 20 into a fraction by putting a 1 under it. Now, at the beginning, what did we find when we multiplied a fraction by its reciprocal? What was the answer? What's the answer to this multiplication right here? 1. Good. Anytime you multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, these things tend to cancel out. This becomes a 1. This becomes a 1. So then I'm left with just w. Over here, on the right side of my equation, again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try to simplify diagonally. Otherwise, if you don't, you're going to get -120/5. And then you're going to have to divide it when it's really big. So if I can simplify here first, 5 divided by 5 is 1. 20 divided by 5 is 4. And now I'm left with -4 times +6, which gives me -24. And that's my answer. So as soon as you see a fraction next to a letter, think reciprocal. And then you don't have to worry because you can see it canceling. Let's try the one. All right, so we have 3/16 equals 1/8 z. All right, what am I dividing by? Which one of the fractions? Noah? Good. What is the reciprocal of 1/8? Okay, now we're not flipping signs. We're keeping it the same sign. So it's just going to be +8/1 is the reciprocal. Now, I know everybody gets confused, and when we're adding and subtracting, we're thinking opposite signs. But in this case, the signs stay the same. We're just flipping to the reciprocal. All right, so then notice right here, when I multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, these become 1s. So then I'm left with z. I can also simplify over here. I can divide 8 by 8 and get 1, 16 by 8 and get 2. And now I'm left with z is equal to 3/2. Now, if you're not comfortable simplifying diagonally, if you would have multiplied it straight out, you would have gotten 24/16, and then you would have had to reduce it to 3/2. Now, when you are taking the quiz or doing homework, I am more than happy to accept your answer as an improper fraction. Okay? Or We can make it mixed number, or we can make it a decimal. So remember, to make an improper fraction into a mixed number, I take the numerator, put it in the division box, goes in here once, multiply and get 2. So then I take my whole number, my remainder, and then the number I divided by. So 3/2 turns into 1.5. If I were to ask you to make it a decimal, again, same process, set up your division box, but this time I'm going to add a 0.0. Goes in here once, subtract, bring down the 0, and you get 1.5. So on the homework or your test or your quiz, I would accept either one of these 3 answers. You don't have to give me all of them, just one of them. Good so far? All right. Here's another example. This time we got 2 fractions. One's positive, one's negative. So again, negative 1/4, and then positive 1/5 b. Which one am I flipping to the reciprocal? The 1/4 or the 1/5? Somebody? 1/5. Okay, it's the one next to the letter. Okay, so flip it, make it the reciprocal, flip it, write it over here, and now I'll multiply. Nothing to simplify diagonally on the left side, so I end up with negative 5/4 is equal to b, because these cancel. Now, you can leave it like that, you can make it a mixed number, or you can make it a decimal. If you make it a mixed number or a decimal, again, 5 in the division box, goes in here once, if I make it a mixed number. So 1 and 1/4, and again, it's negative. Or if I were to add now a 0.0, it would be 2, negative minus 8, add another 0, and I get negative 1.25. So again, any of these 3 answers are acceptable. It's always the top number. So just whenever you have a fraction, think this is in, this is out. Always, even if it's improper. So numerator always goes in the box. You know, if it's a fraction less than 1, you know, then you're going to get regular fraction. But if it's improper, then it'll be a mixed number. Question? And the bigger number goes in the box. All right, next one. Now, this is a little different. And one other thing that I wanted to show you before we go on, what you're going to see throughout this book is if you have a fraction, and if there's a negative sign in the top of it, or a negative sign in the bottom of it, or a negative sign out front, all 3 of these fractions mean the same thing. It's -1/2. However, if you have a -1 and a -2 in your fraction, this simplifies to a negative divided by a negative would turn into a +1/2. So just be aware of that. It's the placement of the negative signs. All right, so again, before in the previous slides, the variable was on the side or next to the fraction. In this problem, the letter is on top. It means the same thing. Now, if the letter were in the bottom, that's a different story. Okay, and we would go solve it differently. But if the letter's in the top or next to it, the process is the same. I'm just going to multiply by the reciprocal of the fraction next to the letter, or that's with the letter. So again, my reciprocal here, flip it upside down. Again, this just becomes a J. Once I cancel things out, these become 1s. I'm left with the letter J. Over here, I'm going to simplify diagonally so I don't end up with, actually, if you multiplied it, you would have gotten 12 over 12. What's 12 over 12 equal? 1. Now, if I went ahead and simplified here, I could do 1, 2, 1, 2, and then I would have gotten 2 over 2. Anytime it's the same number over itself, it simplifies to 1. Okay, here's another example of, this time, a fraction with a whole number. So again, process is the same. If you want to just write the reciprocal right next to this, remember 6 over 1 is really just the same thing as 6. So this cancels, and then when I multiply it, I get 712. All right, now we're at our application, our word problems. So for this problem, it's telling us that Ciro is putting 1/4 of the money he earns from mowing lawns into his college education fund. It said that this year he added $285 to this fund. It wants us to write and solve an equation to find out how much money Ciro earned mowing lawns this year. So the last thing we read is our variable, and that's going to be our letter M to represent the number of lawns mowed. So we want 1/4 of that amount, and it should equal $285. Now, I could also write my equation. So remember, you can write it when it's side by side, or I can even, remember there's an assumed 1 there, put it on top there, and then solve the equation. Again, when I got a fraction next to my letter, I'm flipping to reciprocal. And then these cancel, and I'm left with M is equal to, I'll multiply 285 times 4, and I get 0, 2, 32, 34, and I get $1,140 he made cutting grass, cutting lawns. Good? One more word problem, and we'll be done. All right, last one. This is about distance to the airport when the plane should begin descending. So it says the distance in miles from the airport that a plane should begin descending is divided by 3. So distance divided by 3, and that's going to equal the plane's height. And then it says a plane began descending, so the descent value is 45. Again, we divide it by 3. Once we solve this, it's going to give us our answer. All right. Okay, so that is your lesson. You have those